Hello and welcome to another random. No. Okay, it's in the random encounter playlist, but we all know most of these are not random encounters. They're more like pocket modules that can be placed randomly or used virtually in any capacity as part of an ongoing game. For that matter, it wouldn't take much to turn any of these into its very own one shot. So let's try again. Hello and welcome, fellow adventurers. Today we're talking about an encounter zone I'll be using in my very own Heston campaign. My party is 8th level, but they've come up slow and steady, so they're capable of beating just about anything in the monster manual. If you're using this as a one-shot, 9th level is probably better. If you're noob heavy, 10th might even do it. There's going to be some role-playing, but mostly it's going to be one, hopefully brutal fight against a single legendary being with a fairly significant afterparty. The area came onto my PC's radar when they found out a faction they are opposed to is interested in it. They know these bad guys are looking for something, but my party doesn't know what. For me, it's one step in their quest line. For you, it might just be a one and done, inspired by the rumor mill at the local tavern. Maybe some researcher has turned them on to the location in exchange for a cut. Or perhaps your party just stumbles across it. Whatever the case, when we open our session, the party has a map and a plan. Let's go! The Den has historically been a place where treasure can be found. Several times over the last 1,000 years, valuable magical items have been discovered there. About 40 years ago, several of the daggers of Lace Minois are thought to have been found there. If they were, these artifact-level weapons were taken out of the region. 100 years ago, during the 10 Years' War, the place was home to Abby, the Mad Engineer. What she was mad at, we're not entirely sure, but the Den was raided by forces loyal to the local government for the magical siege weapons there. All have been lost in the intervening decades. Finally, over 300 years ago, the Den was home to a strong demon in service of the Lord Laderna. It is currently believed to be the home of a trove of magical armor and a powerful, wondrous deck. It in fact contains, at least in my game, getting to the location is not difficult. It's on the northern shore of a large lake. My group is familiar with the town on the southern shore and enjoys about a 70% approval rating with the locals. Hiring a boat isn't a problem, and it's about a 16-hour trip, one way. You can check on the weather, but it's probably not going to be anything that's not easily predictable. I have some really weird environmental conditions going on right now, so my PCs may have some extra trouble, but there's no reason to get into that here. The first hurdle is going to be getting permission to go into the area, or making a conscious decision to do so without permission. You see, the local landowner is an ancient silver dragon named Alamath. If that's not bad enough, he's got his whole family with him, his son's mate, their 3 children, and the ancient's deadbeat younger brother, still an adult, who refuses to strike off and make a name for himself. Without a convincing sign of permission, the closest a ship will take the group is the labor camp about a day's hike from the Den. By labor camp, I mean a defensible workers' camp that supports a number of local mines, some fishing, a little farming, and the peat bogs. If this doesn't fit into your world, just make it a small town. The camp, simply known as Camp 5, is on good terms with the dragon and can facilitate a meeting. The camp boss is a human named Sergeant Cole. He's a fighter, a 7th level great weapon champion who favors a great sword he likes to call Lieutenant Lucy. Cole is a foreigner, but he blends in well. For me, he's a possible source of information for things concerning the coast, about 600 miles to the west. Not that the party ever uses their contacts, but you gotta try, right? You can work his origins into the story any way you like, or not at all. Cole is very straightforward. He's secure in his position and has no need to curry favor with the party. However, he's not rude. He's respectful of their accomplishments and may use their visit to bolster the morale of those in the camp. Always remember, PCs in most settings will be considered famous. Sergeant Cole will interview the party as to their plans to make sure he's not wasting the dragon's time. He's also familiar with the Den. He'll reveal there's a big male boar. It's truly an alpha and will be a challenge to deal with. He's heard of plans to just bypass the boars and go directly into the cave, but doesn't like the idea himself. As far as he knows, no one's been in the cave for over 20 years. Alamath considers himself a noble and equal to the Velito nobles of the region. That's not really so bad, considering most other adult and ancient dragons would place themselves even higher. The old Silver handles business just like one of the other dukes, overseeing a number of mines and some farming. He has his own little town. He even has a castle. It oversees a small population of serfs, commoners, and middle class citizens. What exactly is the Bear Valley Hog's Den? Nestled into the hills is a small valley where a population of hogs flourish. They are harvested from time to time by the dragons, but mostly left to themselves. Lesser hunters who venture into the valley are never heard from again. The Bear Lady refers to an ancient statue of a naked half-elf situated on the high ground just above the den itself. She dates back so far almost nothing is known of her, not even if she was once a living being or some representation of a goddess. If an offering of jewelry is left at her feet, the party will eventually receive a subtle boon. My thoughts are a big payday on their next adventure, but it could be anything, some blessing such as listed in the DMG. In mine, it's page 227, but you can check the index for blessings. However, that has nothing to do with the adventure itself. The den is not actually a hog's den, although some of the smaller ones do occasionally wander in. The big guy won't fit. This is a pretty straightforward dungeon, not very large or complicated. But before we go there, let's circle back to the real danger of the adventure. The big boar is a high-end menace with origins in the Fey realm. It lives in the Border Ethereal and can cross over either way as a bonus action 5 times a day. This guy is heavily influenced by Ilharg the Raised Boar from Magic the Gathering, or at least my memories of him and his buddy Galta along with Embercleave. If you know, you know. I'll work up a stat block. It's probably already on the screen about now. But in a perfect world, this guy appears from the ethereal meniscus, gores someone for about 30. Then he action surges to trample for 20. He can even shed heat as a legendary action, essentially a ground zero fireball. He's got other tricks too, but just a bite is 15 points of damage. Then he bonus actions back into the ethereal. If the party isn't running for their lives, he does it all again about 30 seconds later. Now, he's not super bright. He can't pick out the best targets, and he really doesn't plan strategy. He can blip in and out a number of times per long rest, but then he's stuck in place and has to fight it out. It is imperative for... Hey, he doesn't have a name yet. Let's call him Willard. It's impossible for Willard not to defend his herd. Technically, an extremely persuasive speak with animals might establish a truce, but this guy's a powder keg. Also, he's kind of immortal. Short of burning a wish, he'll be back in 2d12 months, stronger than ever. Oh, and in case he's getting whacked from the... That's Willard out of the way. Now let's get into the den. How about we use the most boring game resource in Dungeons & Dragons, the DMG. There's a decent little map of a cave system back in Appendix C. That's page 314 in my book. I'm going to put the Beholder right about here. That's right, it's time for my first 5e Beholder fight. I'm going to put a distraction here. It's an old throne with some kind of mirrored wall. I'll try to trick them into wasting some actions and movement, blasting the reflected image. Bars here will force some decisions. I'll make them adamantium, only a 25 DC to rip them apart, but it'll be at disadvantage, making it a truly difficult task. The Beholder will have a switch to open the gate from his side just in case the party tries to go around. You know, despite all the preparations, I am prepared. I expect him to get killed pretty quick, but maybe he can roast a few people along the way. Fights like this can always swing wildly either way. I am prepared to disintegrate a beloved PC, but I'm also okay if the battle flops the other way. As for treasure, I'll plant a couple of diamonds in this trench. Now how am I going to handle that kind of stuff? Hey, is there anything in the trench? Well, how much time are you going to spend looking? If they say at least half an hour, I'll give them a check, but a pretty high one. DC 30 with advantage. The advantage is for help action. And by the way, my party can make this check. That's why they get the opportunity for a quicker find. If they spend an hour, it's going to be automatic. Now all that's left to do is hand out the treasure. It's going to be a decent find for them. In my party's little quest line, this is mostly checking off boxes. They don't really have the information yet to find out what they're really after. But along the way, they're going to get there. There'll be clues, there'll be opportunities, or they can take it a step at a time and get there the long way. It's all about fighting monsters along the way anyway, right? I hope this helps inspire a few ideas for you. Aside from presenting a usable dungeon and telling a story, I think the lesson here is to use the resources you have at hand. The DMG is pretty good for providing support. Also, don't be afraid to steal from other games and even genres. Copyright laws are not meant to prevent inspiration. It's a good thing, too, because all the original ideas have already been taken. Have a great day, my fellows. Cheers. Today, we stand united, celebrating a great victory, a hard-won success on the battlefield. Cunning, planning, taking advantage of tactics. This victory we celebrate. All right, everybody. Thanks for staying for the results. The party had me off balance almost at once. They did put forth a little bit of effort in talking to the dragon, but when they heard they were going to have to wait for a few days, they actually managed to find one of the lake captains, the only lake captain, who would take them across for just money. It's all he cared about, no questions asked. The Han Solo of the little lake town. You know, the original Han Solo that did stuff illegally, not later the heroic Han Solo that, okay, anyway. 16 hours later, they were making their landing, and I was still running through the chances of them being discovered by the dragons. The sneaky bastards followed the high ground, avoiding the hogs. I did make a roll to see if Willard engaged anyway, but he was feeling compassionate. The party ogled the statue for a moment and headed into the cave. This is where the master strategy began. The cave was large enough to cause them some vision problems, even with those good in low light. They could, however, clearly see the back corner was mysteriously lit by something beholder-like lurking in the shadows. The opening attacks targeted the reflection. Then Ernie the Innovator with many eyes got his turn. We opened by slowing the ranger and charging him up with a little innervation beam. The cleric moved into range on his turn and got a legendary innervation of his own. Round 2, oh, it was so much better. The party's, well, it's hard to label, Zarek. Let's say nobleman. Sure, that's descriptive. The party's nobleman targeted the bars with shatter and did quite a lot of damage to the surrounding stone. The ranger struck twice with arrows. It was a good start. Then Craig stated, quite clearly, I have a plan. He and the ranger immediately fell into lifeless clumps. The party ran. Yep, they ran for their lives. It was probably the right move. They were down 2 of 5 and the beholder had not been significantly hurt. The bars were shaky, but still in place. If the barb could have taken out the rods, Rylanar the fighter would have potentially done a lot of damage in the round. That would have been 3 more attacks from my strategic genius. Obviously saves matter. So far, the party had failed to make one. The beholder was at the top of the round, so Ernie the Innovator with many eyes would have probably forced at least 5 more saves before the fighter and the barb could get in and finish him off. It was a coin flip, but failure would have probably meant a complete party wipe. As it was, they were just down a sleepy ranger and an unfortunately dead cleric. Oh, and remember how they skipped Willard? Oh, on the mad dash for the boat. The party's nobleman decided he was going to at least get dinner out of the excursion. He stuck a pig on the way by and triggered the big bad. Of course, I had to be a smart-ass. Now the main encounter you bypassed. The beholder was just an afterthought. Willie came in hot, sending the ranger right back down to 0 before he had a chance to do anything. He let go a heat blast, and the next turn he bit the fighter before disappearing from the field. As per his own tactics, he would have appeared for another gore in a few rounds, but the party made straight for the boat, avoiding his wrath. They are able to get Craig, the cleric, raised, and plan to return to the Bear Valley Hog's Den in a level or 2, hence the redaction from the story above. Sorry about that. Ultimately, you're making Willard whatever you need him to be to challenge your party, but there will be a follow-up to this video to tell you what happens to mine. You guys have an absolutely wonderful rest of the day. Hope your weekends are going well. Cheers.